Hi everyone, welcome to LiTup 365 Summer Session 5. We only have one more session of summer after this. We're getting very close. This session is called It's Not Magic. So what we're going to do today is we're going to have a conversation about the last two of our practices, but what I'm going to do is kind of set those up by talking about a little bit deeper conversation. And so I call this the deity conversation. So what we want to ask here is if we think of ourselves as a creator, right? Do we think of ourselves as a creator in our life, or do we think of that as deity outside of ourselves? And we may feel both or none. And that's what I want to talk about. Is what we're really talking about is what we as individuals believe, because that's what's setting up what we attract, right? And so we want to get into that. And so I have a little story I want to share. I was in a spiritual community that was gathered mostly of people that had been in traditional religions, particularly Christian religions. And they had left those religions to become a part of a spiritual community. And they tended to call themselves enlightened, and that they did things differently. And they would talk about the fact that they'd say, well, I don't pray to a God. I don't believe in that anymore. Instead, what I do is I put my word out into the universe, and the universe responds. And after some deep thought, I realized that that meant the same thing to me. That instead of calling God their source, they were calling the universe their source. And instead of using the word prayer, they were saying that they put their word out into that universe and waited for it to respond. And to me, that's what prayers were, is putting out your word to God and waiting for God to respond. And so what it did is prompted in me the question, who is my deity? So who do I pray to, and how does it work? And after a lot of soul searching and careful deliberation, I realized that every prayer I've ever had answered came through a human, person helped me in some way. There was some answer that way. Now, I did have inspiration and vision, so sometimes that person was me, but it always seemed to come in through the human perspective. And so what I started to think of as my universe, as my deity, is the nearly 8 billion people on the planet, plus everything that came before. So it's not just the people living today, but my universe also includes everyone that's ever lived. And so I realized that my prayers were answered by people. Now, at that time, I didn't trust people. I was setting up failure for myself because I believed the universe was people. I had done some deep soul searching, and I believed that was my universe. And I believed it was people who answered my prayers, but I didn't trust people to be there for me. So it made sense that I wouldn't get what I needed, because there was a conflict in my belief system that was working against itself. And I realized I didn't need to change the belief system of what I think the universe is. What I needed to do was work on my trust. And so I realized, okay, if I want to be successful in the world and do well and have a universe that responds to me, I need to trust that universe. And so I worked on it, and now I do. I trust people. I don't just blanketly and implicitly trust everyone to be my source, but I do trust in people. I do trust in humankind. I trust in human kindness. I trust in humans' abilities to respond, no matter where they are. Sometimes the answers to my prayers have come from the most unexpected sources. People that might be someone that would typically do great harm actually came to my aid in some way. So over time, what happened is that I now believe that I now no longer think of my deity as something separate from me. I believe I am an intricate part of this unfolding life, that my desires exist in the same plane of existence as the source that answers those desires. Now, I'm not telling you to believe what I believe. I'm just proposing that you begin to ask yourself some questions, to ask yourself, what is the universe to you? Do you believe in a deity or deities? Do you believe in more than one? Do you believe in the one mind and interconnectedness? Or do you think there are no deities, no connection? Are you more traditional scientific of saying, no, we're just people and we live, and it doesn't work that way? And what we're going to do in homework this week is start to ask these questions. We're going to be asking, who are we praying to? Who answers our prayers? And how will it come? So to be neutral and respect as many faiths as I can. Going forward, I'm going to be using the word source. So whether your source is a deity or the one mind or something tangible in the world, we're going to be using the word source because it's neutral and it fits the application for which I want to use it. So ultimately, when we look at source, what we're really looking at is a parent role, technically. So this is somebody that is supplying resources to us. And so when we're in the mode of using attraction, we are a child because I'm feeling like something outside of me needs to bring it to me. So generally when I'm expressing or creating, I'm in more of an adult role. But in the situation where I'm trying to attract something, have something come in and help me, I'm in a child role working with a parent. And this isn't necessarily bad, it's just a realization of the role that I'm in. And that's what we're going to talk about in the homework this week. And so within that deity conversation, we want to ask, who am I in that? I have this question at the beginning about whether or not do you believe you are a creator? You know, whether we call ourselves enlightened or realized or feel that we're more in that expression role. The important thing to remember is this isn't a journey, a destination we're trying to get to. Enlightened is not something we become. It's what we by nature already are. We're trying to understand our natural state of being. We are already this genius. We've just been limited and bound and told in life not to be that. And so we've kind of lost a connection to an integral part of ourselves. And in that loss, we become disempowered. We want to fully realize our individuality and connect with our creative power. But at the same time, we need to realize we're not just an individual. We are the definition of our individuality as it relates to the whole. So this is where I talk about this concept of contagion, because not only do we have our own lives, but our lives affect others. So even if we're not a person who believes in a ripple or that concept of effect, it's difficult not to recognize that my actions affect the world around me. That if I go out and do something, that there are going to be people affected by what I'm doing, right? And so this for me was a huge realization, because I was kind of an empath and I let other people define who I was because I thought I had to comply to the world. This is where mob mentality comes from, where we just kind of feed off of each other. But the thing we need to realize is, as we're connecting to this, is that survival mechanisms don't work at an individual level. And this is the most important part to connect with. Our brain is always looking for survival, but it's making that decision based off the survival of the species, not just us as an individual. We want to be living in this state where we're being of service to the species, where we're valuable and vital to the species going on, to the species being healthy as it continues forward. But at the same time, when we do that, when we live in this state where we are making sure the species is strong, we are automatically vital and we are automatically healthier. So if I make sure we have a healthy species, I become healthier. So this is really important because life moves from the inside out, and this matters. So we're going to talk about this quite a bit over the next few months, what it means to move from the inside out and to have power and impact the species. But in our conversation this week, I want to tie it back to this great quote by Rumi that I probably brought it up before, but it's really connects to what we're doing this time. Because people tie it to attraction. The quote by Rumi is, what you are seeking is seeking you, right? It's not exactly that. It's something close to that. But so Rumi's saying, whatever you're longing for is also longing for you. And for me, I added something onto the end of that made it more powerful for me. And that is that it was longing my expression of it. So this is where I talk about if I want that thing and it's out here, it's not the thing I want, it's who I think I can be if I have the thing. So that thing is seeking for me to express that as much as I'm seeking to express it. So longing, the real question of longing becomes about what is demonstration? I love this term, allow me to demonstrate. A lot of people use the word demonstration when it comes, or manifestation when it comes to attraction. But it's important to understand the difference. It's important to understand what it means to crave something versus feeling called to it. So if we're craving something, we're waiting for it to come to us. If we're called to it, we're going to go look for it. But if we demonstrate it or express it, it's something that's coming out of us. This is that inside out process. So again, we need to shift our focus of attraction from being a magnet and thinking of drawing things towards us, because it doesn't work. We exist in the now. We always exist in the now. Now we can put our head in the past or future, but our body is always in the moment. And our good exists in this moment, in this now. So when we go to this concept of, I'm going to seek this life of good, and as I seek this life of good, it seeks me. What I really need to say is, if I'm living this state where life is good, right, then it is inherently part of my now. There's so much power in returning to where we are. So this week we're taking a deeper look at that, and we're taking a deeper look about how we affect attraction. So we're taking a deeper look at how we see ourselves, how we're seen, right? If I say that relativity is the way we see the universe and attraction is the way it sees us, then how are we seen? We need to shift our perspective of who we are in the world, right? I have an example. So I talked about being an empath. So being an empath, having social anxiety, I realized that what I was doing as an empath, the reason why I was letting the room define me and the reason why I was absorbing the feeling around me is because I thought I could predict what would happen. Because I thought, if I can predict what this other person's going to do, I can feel safe. It didn't always work. I predicted wrong sometimes, and thinking that I can control it just because I can predict it is a mistake. And what ended up happening is that I ended up losing myself. I ended up not knowing who I was. I didn't know what thoughts, feelings, and emotions that I was having were mine and what belonged to other people, because I was letting that room define me. So I didn't know my own narrative. And so I couldn't possibly see the truth of who I was, because the truth exists even beyond narrative. And I couldn't even see my own narrative. So my first journey was to find my own narrative. And then once I was in my own narrative, I could see the truth beyond the narrative. This becomes really critical in understanding about how the brain works. So this concept of the subconscious mind we talked about, and how it gives information to the conscious mind. I want to share another little story. So I needed some money and I had to get a loan quick. And it was interesting because I was driving someplace to do that. And there were 2 loan places in the area. So I was following something online where I'd called and set an appointment, but I couldn't find it. And the exact address I was looking for didn't exist, but I did see these other two places. So I thought, well, I'm going to give one a try. And I checked in and I said, okay, which one feels better? And there was one that was open and I had a really bad feeling. I'm like, yeah, I just don't feel good about that place. And the other one felt really good to me. So I went to the one that felt good first, and they refused to help me. And then, so I went to the other one, and actually I waited in there for a long time, and it was putting me behind for an appointment, but I had to get this done. So I went to the other one, and the one I had a bad feeling about, and they helped me. And I started to have these feelings because I could think of other situations where I was attracted to the wrong men or the wrong opportunities, the wrong resolutions. And it started to feel like my feelings, what I was drawn to, was not working toward my good. And it was interesting because it gave me this feeling that about writing a book, and it was going to be, you know, what if your guardian angel is working against you? I was thinking, what if my subconscious mind is leading me to what won't work in order to keep me safe, but using rules of safety that hurt me? This is a common issue with people who stay in abusive relationships. What their mind is telling them is safe and that they need to do is actually dangerous, right? And I started to think, well, maybe this is the nothing ever works for me psychology of my subconscious mind. I knew that pattern had existed in my family, and maybe it was playing out. And it was really interesting that was what this whole past year had been about, was things weren't working in my favor. And this was back in the winter time. So the whole year before that, things just weren't swinging my way. But then suddenly I started to feel like they were, and I started to wonder, is my subconscious mind shifting, or is what I'm accepting shifting? We need to remember that quote again. It's done unto us as we believe, not as we think or want or crave, but as we believe. So we need to bring ourselves back to who we are, that internal identity of what we believe, and not what we think. Now, this is the major error in attraction. This is a major error of attraction, the typical attraction practices. I had a recent discovery of a new deity, a new definition of deity. So I thought about like humans, but then I realized that it wasn't just living humans that had been there for me, that I had these experiences during a near death and throughout my life of guidance, of spirit guides, or what you might call guardian angels, or a voice in my head that, you know, suggested I build an ark. I've just always had that. And so I started to ask myself, what is that? What is that deity? And the answer I came up with is anyone who leads me forward. So whether it's a person on earth that I know and I talk to, whether it's an ancestor or someone, an experience in a dream, or a feeling in my heart, whatever definition I give to it, it is anything that leads me forward, so that progresses me. And so I realized I had transcended a lot of classes and situations. So I thought, how do I get my subconscious mind to catch up with that transformation? What I realized is that it seemed that even though I had motivation and willingness to work hard, I was still existing in a lesser caste system that would drive me toward an inherent failure. And I started to realize it was how I was using information. And so this is really important. When we are trying to communicate with the subconscious mind in a language of the conscious mind, right? Words, thoughts, right? So the conscious mind thinks in ideas and thoughts and words. But the subconscious mind exists in feelings, in essences, in a place beyond words. And so to speak words and thoughts to the subconscious mind was trying to communicate it with it in a language it didn't speak. So I was better off speaking it to it in the language it speaks. So Lucy Jo Palladino was wonderful. She wrote the book called Dreamers, Discoverers, and Dynamos, and it's a wonderful book about divergent thinkers. And she talks about divergent thinkers, and she says, so imagine this child in a household that's divergent, and the rest of the household is convergent. And she said, so this child speaks Chinese and the rest of the household speaks English, then you can force that child to learn English. Children will learn, so you can force them to learn that language. However, if the parents were to learn Chinese, it would make it a lot easier if we spoke to children in the language of children. And I learned this with dogs as well. I've learned a lot about dogs from my daughter, and that's what her specialty is. Her entire career is based on behavioral language of dogs. And a lot of humans try to speak to dogs in human language, and they don't understand that. But when you understand dog language, dogs make a ton of sense. They're really easy to understand. And so it's the same thing with our brain. If we understand the language of the subconscious mind, it's much easier to speak to the subconscious mind. So, for example, if the subconscious mind is feeling, internal feeling, not emotion, feeling, how does that feel in my body? And the conscious mind is emotion and words and thoughts. How would I communicate that for attraction? So for example, this happens to us a lot. If you're having a bad day, have you ever noticed that everything goes wrong? It seems like everything starts to work against you. Where if I feel good, good things happen, right? So in that, we want to be in that feeling state, but we want to be bringing new information. We don't want to just check in with the feelings we have. We want to bring a new feeling into that subconscious mind that it wants more than the old feeling. So if I'm having a really bad day, I want to be able to create that good feeling that the brain would rather have than the bad one, because the brain will cling to bad feelings. I remember when I was breaking through out of my triggers, there were so many times where I was angry about something and I knew I just needed to address the trigger, but I wanted to be angry. I felt I had the right to be angry. I always said one of the hardest emotions of the triggered brain is righteous indignation, because it feels so good. And so I want a language that is enticing to that subconscious mind. We need to realize two things in it. We need to come up with two aspects of that. We first of all need to connect to that internal feeling, but we also need to remember that we're interconnected with the entire species. That subconscious brain is not working off you just feeling good. It's working off you feeling good in a way that serves the species. I love the word universe. Someone translated it once to me as one verse, one song, the way we work together. So those subconscious agreements of the brain that work toward the good of whole. So where last week we talked about some of the more surface practices of attraction, I want to go into the deeper ones. How do we communicate with that subconscious mind? And how do we build more faith, but more relationship in being able to bring forth fruit from our longings, from those desires? So we will talk about this week. What we're going to do is talk about a kind of a form of prayer. It's not technically like most prayers. It is very similar to affirmative prayer, but it's slightly different. It's tweaked to be more something that's applicable across the board. So whether your source is deity or deities or the one mind, or it's the bank or your parents or something like that, it's still usable. So this isn't binding us into anything. It's a spiritual practice, but I did need to include prayer because it is an attraction practice. That is not a New Age practice. It is ancient, but it is still a practice of call and receive, and that is what attraction practices are. So we're going to talk about that, and then in the second week what we're going to get into is affirmations. We're going to build a lot of those off of this prayer practice. So it's going to be a lot deeper work, and as we move into the fall and winter seasons, that's what we're going to move into, is the deeper work. Right now we're digging in, but we're going to get deeper and deeper. So I really like this week's session, and I hope you like it too. I hope that it has some ability to connect you with your source, because that's the goal of it, is to really connect, to not have our source be something that's distant from us, that we don't feel really deeply connected to, and especially one that we can't rely on. So if we can't rely on our source to be there for us, then it's kind of defeating the purpose of having one. We feel more abandoned and alone than if we have no source at all, if we have a source that we don't believe in, that we can't count on. So it's about really deepening that and building that connection. So that'll be it for this session, and I will look forward to seeing you at the next session. I hope everyone has an amazing day.